Welcome, everybody, on this Monday afternoon to our Granny Square class. Darren is your teacher there on screen. He's modeling a nice cozy sweater. And we're going to show you how to make that type of Granny Square in this class. You might see that it's a little bit different than what you normally think of when you picture a Granny Square. So we'll go over those differences and how you can really adapt and make a wide variety of Granny Squares, but we'll focus on this mostly solid one for this class. If you've got any questions about the material Darren is covering, go ahead and put that in the chat, and I can either answer directly or I'll pass that on to him to demonstrate on screen. I'll also go ahead and put a couple handouts of patterns that we're going to be referencing in the chat so you can follow along with those if you like. And now that my announcements are out of the way, we'll let Darren get started.
All right, welcome to class. Today, as Claire said, we're going to learn how to make the solid granny square, and we might cover a few other things as well. We're going to do some seaming and talk about gauge. So let's go ahead and just jump to the view of my hands. This is the sweater. We're going to modify a pattern to make this sweater. So I'm going to take this off. It's very warm. So let's go ahead and jump to the view of my hands, and we'll go ahead and get started. It still shows me on the screen. Did we switch to the view of my hands or?
Yeah, it is switched. You just might not be in speaker view mode.
Okay, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine then. Wonder how. Is there a way I can change it at all?
Yeah, if you
Okay,
see
there.
your screen should
Sorry,
have a
I got
little
it.
view thingy, and you
Thank
can
you.
set it to speaker.
Okay. All right. So the yarn that we're going to be using today and we're featuring is this yarn. It's called Wool Ease Roving, and it is a roving yarn. It's put up in this like really, it's not plied and it doesn't have like several small little strings in it like traditional yarn does. It is basically just the wool fibers with a gentle twist in them. So if you pull it apart, you don't get little separate little strings that are plied together. You just get this loose, lofty, really fuzzy kind of fiber. So I don't know if you guys have worked with roving yarn before. I really love a roving yarn. It's one of my favorites. I'm not sure why. I just love the rustic, kind of soft, fuzzy kind of feel to it. It's just very cozy. I really love this style of yarn. And I like natural wool, so this is a yarn that I've really enjoyed working with. It's one of my favorites that we have going right now. This one is it's 100% wool. So it is going to be hand wash very gently and lay flat to dry. No bleach. You don't really ever want to iron knitted wear. So just kind of lay it flat when it's wet very gently. Shape it into the kind of the shape that it should be in and just let it dry overnight. You can put a fan on it to help it dry a little bit faster. This one has 140 grams, which is 299 yards. There's a lot on here. Each one of these balls has a lot of yarn. And it is RWS certified, which stands for Responsible Wool Standard. So it's certified that the wool and the sheep, well, actually the sheep are actually treated in a humane way. And also when they're being when they're raising the sheep and when the sheep are being sheared, they are all these processes are done in a humane way that has been certified. So it's always important to think of the animals and make sure that they're being treated properly. So any questions about the type of yarn, the care instructions? It is a number 4 medium weight yarn or worsted. And for a crochet hook, it's recommending a size J10 or a 6 millimeter. And for knitting, it's recommended in a size 8 or a 5 millimeter. So really, really good yarn. It comes, I love these fall colors that I chose, but it comes in some really fun spring colors. I think there's about 12 or more colors. Do you know how many colors it comes in, Claire?
There are 14 colors total.
Yeah, really good colors. So this is the pattern. We're loosely basing this class on this pattern. And I really, really like this pattern. And one of my favorite things about a granny square pattern is you can make any style granny square you want. You can make a solid square. You can make one that's semi-solid. You can make a traditional open one. You can find a granny square that's made with a different kind of motif inside. Some of them look like flowers, all kinds of things. But as long as you're making the square the correct size, you can make any granny square you like and just sew them together in the form of this schematic, and you'll be able to follow the pattern. So even if you're making a bag, a pair of pants, a sweater, a scarf, a cow, as long as you're making the square the exact same size as the pattern calls for, you can use any square that you want, and you can sew them together and in this format and create the correct size item. And sometimes the size doesn't matter as much, but if you're making a sweater or a hat or something, it's nice if it actually fits when you're done. So I actually used, with this yarn, I used a 5mm hook instead of a 6, because that gave me the size square that I really liked. Not only size, but it has a softness to it, and then the square actually has a nice kind of a drape. So that's why I chose this one. This one is with a 4mm, and you can see it is smaller, and it's getting a little bit stiffer. So maybe you would like this size better. Maybe this is going to work into a sweater that will fit you, and maybe you want it to be a little stiffer. This one, I used a size 3mm. You can see they get progressively smaller. So this is just a little review on how gauge works. If you use a smaller crochet hook for each one, then they'll get progressively smaller. And then this is with a 2mm, and this one's very stiff. So I probably would never make a whole sweater out of this style, but maybe if I were making like a purse, maybe I would want it to be stiff like this, or even maybe a pillow or something you want it to really hold its shape. That might be nice. So whenever you're making your squares for your granny squares for your project, don't be afraid to go ahead and make about 3, 4, 5 of them with a different size hook, and then see which size is going to be the most appropriate for your project. And while you're doing that, you can also decide how you want your fabric to feel. And so that's kind of how I decided which one was best for me. Any questions about how that works? You can see they do look a little different. This one that's knitted, or I'm sorry, this one that's crocheted on the smallest one, it looks quite a bit different than this big one that's looser. It has a different, kind of a different texture, but it's definitely stiffer. What do you think about that, Claire?
I think that's a good way to illustrate the difference that just switching up your hook size can make.
Yeah, and that's something that's really important with gauge. People get really confused about gauge, or they don't like to do a gauge swatch, but it's kind of a fun experiment just to see how much difference you'll actually find in each hook. Like these two don't make a huge difference. Each time you go down, they don't make a huge difference, but a little bit. But as you can see, like then that's a huge difference. So yeah, it's kind of fun to do and kind of fun to play with. I'm going to show you something else I did with that here in a little bit. So any questions about gauge and why gauge matters? All right, so now I'm going to show you, I want to look at this chart. This pattern is, it's a granny square scarf pattern, and I'm going to use one of the squares that are in this scarf pattern to make that sweater that I was showing you. And so you can I think Claire's going to put this in the chat, but you can also go to Lion Brand and print this pattern for free. It's just called Granny Square Scarf, but the pattern number is L80058. And you can print it for free, and you can print it as many times as you want to. And so what we're going to look at is this chart. I really do like a chart. So if we look at the key, this circle is a slip stitch. The chain is this kind of oval, and a double crochet is this T shape with a line across the center. So that's what each one of these symbols will mean. Okay. And I've worked these granny squares up in different stages of completion so that we can see how they look as we go. So when you're following a granny square chart, you're going to start right here in the middle. And you can see it's starting with 3 chains that are joined with a slip stitch. And then we chain 3, so 1, 2, 3. And that counts as our first double crochet. And then we're going to work 2 double crochets in the center. And then this chart wants us to chain 2 and then work 3 double crochets in the center. Chain 2, 3 double crochets, and we finish our next corner, and then we join it with a slip stitch. And then we'll fasten off, we'll reattach, and we'll chain and start our second round. So let's go ahead and look at that first round. So I'm going to start with this gray. I'm demonstrating with a different yarn because this yarn is so thick, it's much easier for students to see what I'm doing. The Woolies Roving, even though it is one of my favorite yarns, it's smaller and it's kind of fuzzy, so it doesn't show up as well on camera. And this is Woolies Thick and Quick. I'm not sure the color name, but it's one of our Woolies Thick and Quick colors. So if you, when you're starting your granny square, so you want to start with a slip knot, and it's nice if the tail is what controls the size of the slip knot, right? Now I'm going to show you a trick that I like instead of magic ring. I don't ever actually use magic ring. I don't think it's magic personally. I think it is just all smoke and mirrors. I don't think there's anything magic about it. So let me show you what I do instead. So I'm going to chain 3 as my pattern requested, and I'm going to join it with a slip stitch. Okay. And then we're going to chain 3 for our first double crochet. And now I'm going to work 2 double crochets in the center of that ring. So sometimes it's nice if you put your finger in the center so that you can keep track of where you're working. So what we have is we have our chain 3 with our center. I have my chain 3 then, which is kind of my step up to create my, and that counts as my first double crochet. And then I have 1, 2 double crochets. So I have 3 double crochets. And then the chart wanted us to chain 2. And I'm going to do 3 double crochet in the center. Now what I'm doing is I am crocheting over my tail. So you can see here's my tail. And I'm going through that center and I'm crocheting around that tail. And that's going to serve as my magic ring substitute, which I actually think is much easier. Chain 2 for my corner. Now I'm going to work 3 double crochets in the center, chaining around my, I'm sorry, I'm working my double crochets around that tail. And I'm going to chain 2 for that corner. Now I'm going to work 3 double crochets in the center. And I'm continuing to crochet around that tail. I'm going to chain 2 for my last corner and join it with a slip stitch and then fasten off. Okay, so there's my center, and I've got that hole kind of in the center. And the whole thing about magic ring is then we're able to kind of close up that hole. And because I've crocheted around my tail, all you have to do is just pull it and it pulls it shut. It's so easy. Like I never do magic ring because I want to change its name to smoke and mirror ring because there's nothing magic about it. How do you feel about that, Claire? Smoke and mirror ring?
Illusion ring instead of magic, huh?
Okay, maybe illusion. It's an illusion ring. Well, that might be a little more generous. But I just always do it this way. How do you do it? Do you do it this way or do you do magic?
I have done the magic ring or the magic circle enough that, it's not too hard for me, but this certainly works, I think, just as well. So use
Yeah,
whichever way you like.
I'm just gonna tell everyone a secret. Like I all have always just done it this way, and I thought this was magic ring, and then decided I'd watch some videos to see how other people do it, and I'm just like I don't want to do that. I would rather do this. So I've never really learned magic ring. I just felt like this was easier. So that's how I've chosen to live my life. I hope it's right. Do you think it's the right choice?
I think you could go ahead and use whichever way works best for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's all magic ring does, right? It just closes that center.
Yeah, I think probably they work very, very similarly, but if you like with magic ring, you sort of have to hold that open loop and the tail together, which could be a little tricky for some people. So this is a good alternative.
What do our students saying? Do they think I'm blast? Do they think I'm like going too crazy over here by not doing magic ring?
Nope, nope, no accusations of craziness so far.
I was worried about that. I thought there could be all kinds of accusations going on. Now I'm going to show you. So this is going to create a semi-solid square. So what we're really going to end up with are holes in each corner, and those holes will continue on up the entire square. So it'll be mostly solid, but you will have these openings on the corners. I'm going to quickly show you how to make one um, that's completely solid so that you don't have any holes in it. So let me show you that quickly, and then we'll continue on. Take questions. So it wants us to chain 3. Sometimes I chain 5. I don't always do what I'm told. I'm kind of a renegade. I just kind of make it up as I go. All right. So usually what we'll do is we'll start with a chain 3. We start with a chain 3, and that counts as our first double crochet. But I've been making a lot of granny squares, and I've actually been using what's called a standing double crochet instead of a chain 3. So let me move all this stuff out of the way so it's easier to see. And let me know if you can see this well. So what you do is you pull up your loop and make it a little bigger, a little taller. And I'm just kind of holding my fingers here in the center so I don't lose that center. So when you do a double crochet, you have to do a yarn over. And the trick is you have to hold your finger on that strand of yarn right there. You don't want it slipping around on your hook. So you bring it towards yourself and you do a yarn over, you enter, you pull up a loop, and you kind of make it tall enough, and then you have to bring it through and then bring it through, just like a normal double. And that's called a standing double crochet. And that looks more like a double crochet. You don't, sometimes when you do granny squares, you can see that chain kind of progressing up. But this way it looks just like a almost just like a double crochet. And then now I'm just going to do my next 2 double crochets. And now when I say I have 3 double crochets, it really looks like it. It seems more correct. What do you think of that, Claire? Have you ever done that before?
I have seen that referenced in patterns, but I've never tried it myself. But you just demonstrated it so well that I think I'll give it a go.
Yeah, I've really reverted to this. This is my new favorite way. And then so I've done my 3 for my side. Now the chart wanted us to chain 2, but instead of chaining 2, I'm going to do a triple crochet to create my corner. So 1, 2, 3. You don't get to do a lot of triple crochets, so it's kind of fun when you can. And when I do these, I like to put a stitch marker on my triple crochets to mark my corner. So now I'm going to do 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and 1 triple for my corner. So instead of chain 2 for the corner, I'm switching to a triple. And then I'll put a stitch marker to mark my corner. And I'm going to do 3 double crochets for my side. So just remember, when you're making a granny square, you have to have 4 sides and 4 corners. So it's, square, we all know what a square is. So I'm not very good at geometry or math, but I do know a square has 4 sides and 4 corners. Do my triple for my next corner. They haven't changed that in new math, have they? Isn't there a new math? Maybe squares are different now.
As far as I know, squares still have 4 sides.
Oops. Do my 3 double crochets to complete the last side. I need 1 more corner, so I'm going to do my triple for the corner. And this way you get a solid granny square. So if you want, and then I'm just going to join it with a slip stitch. So if you want your item to be warmer or more, so like if you're making a bag or something, you might not want it to fall out. Or if you're making a sweater, you might not want holes in it that are see-through. You can make solid granny squares. And then if you mark them with a stitch marker, then that way you always know where that corner is. And when you come back around, they'll be easy to find. All right, so this time I didn't crochet over my tail to use my secret magic ring, my faux magic ring. But here's another way you can do it. So you just take your large-eyed blunt needle, and when you weave in that end, you just weave it in around that center kind of ring. You see how when I weave it in, I'm going around that center. I'm going underneath those stitches, those double crochets, just around the center. And then you give it a tight pull, and then you secure it. And now it's the same as a magic ring. So even if you don't plan ahead and do it the way I showed you the first time, you can still close that up. And I feel like that's just as good. So don't tell anyone I'm doing this because I might get in trouble. I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble. This is between us friends. See, and now that's all closed up. Magic ring. Faux magic ring. Illusion ring. Any questions about how to start that or how to make it solid? And you kind of square it up a bit. No questions?
Can you go over the solid bit again, and particularly turning that corner? I think probably that's where we get some trickiness going on.
I'm gonna do my standing double. So pull up a big loop. Make sure you put your finger, you have to hold your finger right there. You can't let that slip around. Sometimes it kind of collapses and you might have to give it another try. You bring it towards you, yarn over, enter. And now, just like a normal double, you have to bring it through twice. And this is a little awkward, but a little practice you can get there. Whoops, it slipped off. I have to start again. Let me show you another way that I've done it before. This is a little bit easier way. So instead of yarning over, let me see if I can remember this. Instead of yarning over, you just go through and bring up a loop, but then you have 2 loops there. And so you have to wrap your yarn around it. And now I think I'm doing it wrong. And then bring it through. Let me see how this works. No, that's not, I can't remember how. There's another way to do it, but I can't quite remember how. So let me show you this way. 3. And if you don't like that way, you can just do the traditional chain 3, but I always like to learn something new. So there's my traditional chain 3, 4, pull up a bigger loop. You have to hold it so it doesn't slip like mine did. Go under it, and then bring it through 2 and bring it through 2. So it's pretty much just like a double crochet at that point. I just think it looks a little nicer. So you can try it. Maybe you'll hate it. Maybe you'll like how it looks. So there I did my 3 double crochets. And for the corner, I'm just doing a triple. So very easy. A triple crochet is very easy to do. And I recommend your first several of these, put a stitch marker on that triple so that you're sure which one it is when you come back around. So then 3 double crochets. And then a triple for the corner.
And just in case anyone hasn't done one before, how do you do that triple crochet?
Okay, let me show the next one. So I'm going to mark this one. So a double crochet, you start with a yarn over, you bring up a loop, you bring it through 2, and then you bring it through 2. Yarn over, bring up a loop, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, yarn over, enter the center, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. That's a triple. I'm sorry, that's a double. Now a triple, you yarn over twice. So it's very dramatic. So you yarn over twice. And at this point, it's pretty easy. It's almost just like the double, and you do it 3 times. So you go through and you bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. So it's pretty much like a double, only you're doing it 3 times instead of twice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then hence the name triple crochet.
It's nice when things make sense, isn't it?
It is nice, yes.
All right, so I'll show you the triple one more time. So I'm at my last. So sometimes if you kind of get lost in the square, you're not sure where you are, just kind of lay it down. I've got my 3 corners marked. This is why it's nice to mark the corners. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. I just need to do one more corner. So, I mean, it seems silly, but sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you can kind of get lost where you are. So yarn over twice, enter, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2, and then you just join it with a slip stitch. Off. And to mark it, so it's my slip stitch that I joined. So this is my triple crochet. And that is a solid one. So let me show you how to do the next round. So the next round, when we're working on solid or semi-solid granny squares, we're actually going to work into each stitch. So like if you were making a scarf or a baby blanket, you would work into each stitch on the previous row. Usually on a granny square, you're not working in the stitch. Usually on a granny square, you're working in this kind of chain space, and you're not actually going into the stitches. So that's the main difference. So traditional granny square, you work into that, like right here, you work into that that chain space, and that's what creates those holes. And for a solid one, we're actually going to work into the stitch. Now, when I join a new color, I don't like to join my new color on the same corner that I just finished in. I like to just pick a different corner. I feel like that makes it a little bit more secure. Do you think so, Claire? Or do you think it matters? Maybe it doesn't matter.
I do. I like to pick a different corner, mainly because I don't want to weave in all my ends along that one section because
Yeah.
I feel like that makes it a little bit bulkier in that
Yeah, it's
area.
gonna make it weird there, yeah. All right, so to join a new color, I like to do it, I like to start on my corner. So I like to start completing my first corner. So I'm going to just put my hook through that stitch, through that triple crochet, lay your yarn across your hook, and then just pull up a loop. And I'm going to join it with a slip stitch. And then I like to do my standing double. So I'm going to do another standing double. So bring up a loop. You have to, I found the trick is you have to really hold that loop from sliding. So you do your yarn over, just like for a normal double, enter the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. And that's why it's a double, because it's a standing double, because it's practically just like a double. Now for the corner on a solid granny square, we're going to work 2 doubles. So I did my standing double, and then I did a double, and now I'm going to work a triple. So in each corner, you're going to do, let me move my stitch marker up. So in each corner, you're going to do 2 doubles, a triple, and then 2 doubles. So you're doing 5 stitches in that corner stitch, which seems like a lot, but it works out okay. Now, for my side, I have 3 stitches I have to work into. So 1, 2, 3, and it's not a bad idea to kind of look for them before you just start crocheting and make sure you see where you are. So 1, 2, 3 stitches. I'm going to work directly into each of those, like I normally do when I'm double crocheting. I'm not working to any chain spaces or anything. So just standard traditional doubles. And then for my corner, so I know I'm going to take this stitch out. I'm going to do 2 double crochets. And in that same stitch, and then in that same stitch, I'm going to do a triple. As soon as I do my triple, I'm going to mark it so I'll be able to find it on the way back. And I'm going to do 2 double on the other side to finish that corner. Okay, so I've got my 2. And then 1, 2, 3. I have to do my 3 side stitches. So 1, 2. Is everyone able to see where I'm going in? Is it clear enough what I'm doing? I'm never sure if it's showing right. And then I'm going to do 2 doubles for my corner. So I did 2 doubles right there in that corner space. 2 yarn overs for my triple. I'm going to do a triple crochet in that same corner space. So in that same corner stitch, really, I guess is a more appropriate way to say it. And I'm going to mark my new triple. And then to finish that corner, I'm going to do 2 more double crochets. And that's going to take me around that edge to the next side. And then I'm going to work into these 3 stitches. So there's my corner. So 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. And it's not a bad idea to kind of identify those before you just start jumping in with crochet. 1, 2, 3. On my corner. So I'm going to do 2 doubles. A triple. Oops. Move up my stitch marker. Always nice. You'll be glad you did this. You can always know exactly where your corners are. You won't have to guess. So 2 doubles, a triple, and then 2 doubles for the other side of that corner. Now I have to finish off my last side. So I have 1, 2, 3. 3 stitches on that side. So I found those. So 1, 2, 3 stitches, 3 double crochets, and I'm going to join it with a slip stitch and then fasten off. And let's rest here for just 1 second and I'll see if there are any questions. But you can see how this is a nice solid square and it's going to be warmer and kind of more protecting of your items if you're making a bag, or more modest if you're making a sweater, maybe. What do we think, Claire? We like it or not? Maybe we hate it. Do we hate it?
No, I think that looks nice.
I like these. I really like these. And then
Yeah,
for my sweater, you can see, once you get all the colors going, you almost get a little space on the corners because you're doing 5 stitches in each corner. But as it relaxes and it kind of gets fuzzy, it kind of fills in. You don't really notice that.
yeah, it's not nearly as big a space as you would get with like your usual chain space, that's for sure.
On this tiny one where I really use the 2 millimeter, it closes all those holes. So if you were making like a bag or something that you really didn't want any holes at all, if you really go down, you could. And then if you threw these in the washer and the dryer and washed and dried them, they'd become pretty solid, don't you think?
Oh
If you
yeah,
wanted
those
to
would
make
be very
something,
solid. Yeah.
yeah, if you wanted to make like a really secure purse or like a heavy, like a really warm jacket or something.
Yeah,
Oh,
or like a
that's what I
nice
love
set of
about wool. There's
coasters.
always options. You can do different things.
Yeah. Oh, question on your square. Michelle wants to know, where do you slip stitch into? Is it where your stitch marker is at the corner?
We'll talk about that, Claire, 'cause I'm not sure I do it the way most people do. I always do things the weird way. All right. So I'm going to finish my last couple of stitches. So here's my double, and here's my last double. Now, if you look here, you want to find and make sure make sure you know what you're looking at. This is my standing double crochet. So technically, you want to just follow up to the top of that and slip stitch kind of technically you slip stitch right before, because here's for my corner. So you want to slip stitch right on top of that double crochet. And this is over one too many. This should be here on the corner. Somehow I got it in the wrong place. So you want to slip stitch right on that double crochet. So you follow that standing double and then you go right on the top of it. And if you're doing a chain two, or I'm sorry, a chain three when you get up there, you when you do your chain three, you can put a stitch marker. Let me show you. And then that will always kind of mark where you're supposed to do it. But sometimes I'll skip this one and I'll go in one and do it. Because this slip stitch, you see how it forms and kind of makes a stitch? Then sometimes I feel like I'm adding one if I don't do it there. But if I do it there, I feel like I'm having the right number. Because I have 1, 2 that I added, 1, 2, 3 that I did for my stitches for my side, and then 1, 2 that I added for my other corner. So I feel like, which way do you do it, Claire? Do you kind of move in one or you do it right on the top of that?
Well, I usually do the chain three to start the new round. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, it's easier for me if I put a little stitch marker on that third chain, so the top one of there, and then
And
go
then,
into that.
okay, and you go right into that chain three then.
Yeah.
Let me show you how to mark those. So let me go ahead and join this. Okay, let's do another color. I'm going to start on this other corner over here. So to start your new color, you just put I like to start, you can start anywhere. It's the beauty of this. You could start in the middle, you could start anywhere. But I always like to start in a corner. Would you start in the corner or where would you start, Claire? Just anywhere, or what would you do?
I guess I usually start in the corner. It just seems more logical to me.
Yeah, for some reason it seems like it makes more sense, but you don't have to. So you just put your hook through a stitch, just drape your yarn over the hook and bring it through and just pull up a loop. And that's all you do to join it. And then I'm going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then let me see if I have a different color. I'm going to use this bright yellow one. I'm going to put that right on my chain, and that's going to mark my chain 3. Now I'm going to do a double crochet, And so the chain 3 counts as a double, and then I just did a double. So now I'm ready to do my triple for the corner. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to mark my corner. That way I have the top of my chain marked and I have my corner marked. Now I'm going to do 2 doubles. So each corner, remember, you'll have 2 doubles, a triple, and 2 doubles. You'll have 5 stitches in each corner. It's not quite as excessive as it sounds, but I guess it is kind of a lot. And then each time you go around, you're adding 4 stitches on each side. So I had 3 stitches down here. And then when I did my green round, I did two doubles, my triple, and then on this side I did 2 doubles. So not counting the very corner, I added 2. I have my 1, 2, 3. I added 2, and then I've got my corner. So in between the corners, you have 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now on this corner, I have my corner, and then I'm adding 2, and then I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll add 2. I'll have 8 and 9. So each time you go around, you're adding 4 stitches to each side, but not counting the corners, because the corners, if you counted them, you'd have to count them on all different sides, and that would seem like you're adding stitches. So I never count the corners when I'm looking at it that way. So you're always increasing by 4. Do you count the corners in that, or do you go by what's in between the corners? What makes more sense?
I think I usually count what's between the corners
Yeah,
because
that's
then
what I
I think of those corners as separate from the rest of the round.
Yeah, because if you count the corners on this side and then you count them again on this side, you've counted each one. You're going to end up counting them all twice, and it'll kind of throw off the logic, I think. So I'm going to do my 2 doubles, and that's adding 2 into this corner. I added 2 into the previous corner, so that's my total of 4 added for this. And then I'm going to do my triple. And then do my 2 doubles. And once you get like past the second round or third round, then it's just very intuitive, and you can keep going, and you can make these as large as you want. You could make like a king size blanket. So let's look. I've got my corner done, and I'm gonna have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 green stitches on the side. And so sometimes it's not a bad idea just to stop and look where your stitches are and kind of count them before you. Sometimes this stitch here can kind of be smushed under, so you kind of sometimes have to pull it out of the way. But just find them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that way you won't lose, you won't get a kind of an odd or a kind of a random number of stitches. You'll always be able to keep an accurate count. But I have noticed this yarn's pretty big, so it doesn't really happen. But if you're using smaller yarn, sometimes that first stitch, like the first stitch on this green row, could be kind of smushed under that purple, and you might skip it by mistake. So just kind of watch out for that if you're using smaller yarn. And then I've done all of my, up one more stitch, one more of my 7 for the green round. Now I'm going to do 2 more in that corner to increase this corner. So now I've added a total of 4 stitches on this side, 2 here and 2 here. Then my corner, yarn over twice. Any questions about this? It's actually, once you get going, it's pretty logical. But I do like to mark my corners because it really just kind of helps to, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to wonder if you got it right or wrong. But that triple's pretty easy to spot once you get used to looking at them. What do we think, Claire? Any questions?
I think that looks pretty good.
I think we should look about seaming them. Like, how do we sew these together? There's one to be missing.
Yes, you've made a bunch of them. Now what do you do with all your
What do we do
squares?
with what we do with them? Go ahead and finish this one real quick. I'll have two the same size to sew. So what's your favorite granny square? Which one do you like best?
I think I have mostly just done like the traditional one with all those spaces. I did do one, I think maybe it was called like a daisy granny square. That was pretty fun to do.
Yeah, I made a baby blanket where the center of it looked like a big flower, and that was really pretty. It had like
Yeah.
stuff stitch in it, and
Yeah, I used color so it looked more like a sunflower than a daisy,
yeah.
but you could really customize your flower.
Have any are any students saying they've made squares before, or is this their first, gonna be their first go at it?
I think we have a couple people working along with us, so they might be newer or maybe never tried this type of granny square.
I think this is my favorite one. I do like the open one, but I feel like this is more functional, like more usable.
Depends on what your end project is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to push through this as fast as I can so I can seam them together.
That's the good thing about super bulky yarn too. It goes
Yeah,
pretty quickly.
goes really fast. Okay, this is good. Then I can show you how to. So then here is the corner, and this is the yellow one where I marked that my chain three. So I'm just going to go around that chain three, and it's really easy to find because I've put that stitch marker there. So that's the best way if you're not sure where to join it with a slip stitch, is if you put a stitch marker, then you'll always be able to. Stitch markers are your best friends. Like I love a stitch marker, especially in crochet. So I just think they're always going to be helpful. And it's not a bad idea to leave them on too while before you start seaming, because if everything went right, you have the exact same number of stitches on each side, and it makes it really easy to sew them together. And it makes it really easy to make a very nice and neat seam. Now, when I make granny squares, and this is just my personal choice, I always finish the outside edge with the same color. Even if I make the insides different, I like to do the outside edge the same color, and then I will sew them together with that color, and it makes the seams almost completely invisible. That's just something I like. Do you do it that way, Claire, or no?
If I have planned out the project ahead of time, yes.
Yes.
But a lot of my granny squares are scraps, so they're a little bit mix and match.
Okay. So there are many, many, many ways of sewing together granny squares. And I'm going to use this gray color just so you can see what I'm doing. When I sewed that sweater together, I used a method. It's called the inside out stitch. And the reason I like that one is because it kind of brings the granny squares just together, but it doesn't really create a ridge for a seam. And so because I still have my seam or my corners marked, I am going to be sure I can start right there on my corner. And with this stitch, you're always starting underneath and coming out. So you're always starting from the inside, working your way out. So see how I'm coming from the inside out, and I'm coming from the inside out. See, I'm coming from underneath and then out the top. And I'm always doing that from underneath out the top. And let me show you how this looks then in a few seconds. I'll do a couple more. Almost like mattress stitch, but it's a little different. Okay, and then when you pull it, but I don't know if you can see, like there's not really a seam or a ridge on either side. don't know if you can see that. It really makes that seam lay flat. So if you were making a blanket, like an Afghan, then both sides would look the same and there wouldn't be a right side or a wrong side for like on a baby blanket. And the reason I did this for the sweater was I was afraid it was going to get a little small. And instead of losing, you lose so much if you have a seam that folds under, this just brings them right next to each other. So you don't really lose very much when you're seaming them. You don't really have to leave a seam allowance. You just come up. And I'm just going right through that stitch. Like if I were going to crochet, I would crochet, I would crochet right through there. And so I'm just sewing right through there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a little bit like lacing up your shoes.
Yeah, actually, it's really like, have you ever done this stitch or what stitch do you like?
I haven't used that one for crochet, but I think it's very similar to like how you would do a mattress stitch with knitting,
It's similar. Let me
like a
pull this.
similar motion overall.
Yeah. Now, mattress stitch is also a great one for crochet. And with mattress stitch, it is very similar, but you're kind of moving in and you're picking it up here. And it's more like you're not coming up through here, but you're kind of coming up on the edge. And let me show you the difference in that one. It is very similar though, but it creates a different look at the end. And then I'm going to show you quickly how to crochet them together. Okay, so it's mattress stitch, and then you pull it tight, and it turns the seam inside out. So even with this different colored yarn, it doesn't show at all. But then what you do get is you get this, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but you do get a raised seam on the back. Does that show? Like right there, you get a raised seam. See, it's flat down here, but you get a raised seam right there. And that's fine too. It's a great seam and it's visible from the front. And then this way, you could have a raised seam around each one of your squares, and that can add texture. And maybe that's even what you want the front to look like. So it could be the front or the back with that raised seam on it, because it could be very decorative. What do you think about that, Claire?
I think that's a good demonstration of the two of them because yeah, you
Yeah.
do the one downside I find with the mattress stitch is that you get that ridge on the inside.
Yeah. All right. And then so granny squares, you want to put the nicest sides on the outside, really, even though they look pretty similar, but there is a difference. So for this technique, you hold right sides together, and then you do want to, it's nice to find a good corner. And then you can either slip stitch them together or do single crochet. So if you slip stitch them together, you're just going through each stitch like normal. And you just pull up a loop and then bring it through. So this is a slip stitch. And you have to be careful with this. It can get a little tight if you don't, pay attention to make sure you're giving a little extra slack. And this is a nice way to join them. And what this will give you, I'm not going to go clear across, but what this gives you, it also gives you a raised ridge. And you'll end up with kind of a chain on one side, and the other side, you'll kind of get these loops. But if you do it with the exact same color yarn, then it's not really going to show at all. But you get that on the side. Now, if you single crochet them together, and this might be something you want to do if you want to kind of create a decorative ridge. And you could do this in a different color, like a complementary color. So basically, you just do a single crochet. You go through each one, and then you do a single crochet. You go through each stitch, do a single crochet. Get a couple going, and we'll see how they look. And if you're careful when you go through each stitch on each side and line them up correctly, then they'll fit together perfectly. couple more and we'll look at it. And then you can decide what you like best. Okay, I'm not really gonna finish it. All right. So you see how it gives it that raised edge? But because I have the centers the same gray and then this edge in the same gray, it could look very pretty. You could make that as part of like a feature of it. Do you think that would be pretty clear on the right side, or would you put that on the wrong side?
Yeah, because that if you did it like around each square, then you're sort of putting like a frame around each of them. So
So there's
that's a
lots and
fun
lots of
look.
options. And usually the pattern will just say seam it. So you can seam it however you want. You don't have to seam it any particular way.
And you can use all of those granny squares you made for your gauge swatches to practice your seaming.
That's a good idea. Yeah. So there's one last thing I wanted to show our students quickly. So just a few minutes. So you can see how these sleeves are fitted together. You have 4 granny squares and then you're sewing them into 3. Now, when you sew them, you don't want to have this kind of step down. I don't know if you can see that. You kind of want to ease those in so that you're kind of having a gradual process. So you would sew these 3 together to make the top of the sleeve. And then you're going to have these, there'd be 3, I'm sorry, there'd be 4, make the top of the sleeve. And then you have these 3 for like the next part to make it a little smaller. So what I would do is I would sew these 4 together in kind of like a scarf shape. And then I would sew these 3 together in a long kind of a scarf shape. And then kind of place them in the middle because you want to kind of ease them together evenly. And then when you start sewing them, I would probably put a kind of a clip here in the middle to kind of manage where my expectations are so that I don't like go down or up too far. And you're going to sew through to kind of make these, you would kind of could sew through here, starting on the corner. You would bring your corners together and sew them. And then as you're going down, you would like you would skip a stitch, like you would bring the corners together because you do want them together. And then you would skip maybe 2 stitches. And then on this one, you would do every stitch. And then what that's going to do is it's going to pull it so that it's pulled together. And then that will kind of ease it in. So I'm probably not explaining this as clearly as can you think of a better way to explain that? Does that make sense? Or not? Maybe it makes 0 sense.
No, I think that's a good way. Yeah, where you sort of have to stretch the one square and then
Yeah.
squish the other square.
You can kind of stretch it like that and do it. And then when it relax, and that's going to give you the same thing because you're going to get all of those stitches and then you get it worked into the place. And then it'll so you can stretch it or you can just kind of ease it in, but you don't want to leave it at that corner. You don't want to have like an odd step there when you're sewing it or else it'll look funny. But what I did on mine, because I'm always going to do something different, I made granny squares in different sizes because I wanted them to line up. So on mine, and this is where I think gauge is really nice. See, this one is the same size as that, that's the same size as that, and that's the same size as that. So I just made smaller squares so that way the sleeve gets smaller as it goes down because you don't really have stovepipe sleeves where it starts like a certain size on your shoulder and it remains the same size going down. You want it to taper as it goes down. And because we have squares and squares are, if the squares are all the same size, then we're going to either have to have less squares or smaller squares, or maybe we'll just, kind of have a stovepipe. But if we use smaller squares, I find them easier to sew together and because they're much closer in size, and then you still get them all lined up nicely so that you don't have them staggered like this. Didn't think I was going to like them staggered as much. What do you think of that idea, Clara? Do you think that's easier?
I think that's a brilliant idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was. If I must say so myself, I thought it was rather clever. And then, this will be, I have to finish the bottom of it because the sleeve hits me right about here and it's still too big. But I think by the time I get this on, I have to make 3. I think that'll fit my cuff pretty well. So don't be afraid to make some squares in different sizes and kind of sew them together in different ways to add some shaping to your work. A lot of times granny squared items are very square and boxy, but if you make squares in different sizes, you could even add waist shaping if you wanted to have a more tailored look, like some of the squares in the middle. If you wanted to have a more tailored look, like maybe this middle stripe here could all be made with one size hook smaller, and then it would kind of pop in at your waist and then kind of kick out a little bit at your hip. That could be cute. You think that'd be cute, or would that be a good idea, Claire? Maybe not.
Yeah, if you wanted, like you said, like a little more tailored look or, slightly less positive ease around the middle.
Yeah. Because sometimes, they can get kind of boxy and maybe they're not as stylish as you would like. But we can really take our work to the next level by um, really tailoring it to your figure, to your shape, to your taste, to your style, and kind of give it that extra little elevation.
Yeah. Well,
Any
we are
questions?
at the end of our class time here. We've run a little bit over today, even. But thank you, everybody, for joining us on this Granny Square journey here. We've enjoyed having you. And if
And
you've joined us for our next class, our previous classes, thanks for coming along.
if anyone has any questions going forward, my Instagram handle, my Instagram name is on the screen there, Mr. Woolly Bear. So don't feel free to send me a direct message if you have any questions about anything we covered, or if you need any help with your crochet or knitting, just send me a direct message.
There we go. I popped it in the chat real
Okay,
quick
thank you.
there. Yes, yes. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming to class. Don't forget to practice.